Even though it's not 1:30 yet, I'm going to call this meeting to order because it seems like they're all, oh, there it went. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I have the regular minutes of June 11th. All those in favor? And move it for the closed session.
Move it.
All those in favor? Okay, thank you. On the consent agenda, I have 4 items pulled, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3. I guess that's 3. Is there any other?
411?
Yeah. Did I say that?
No.
Okay, 4.11. Could I have a move for the rest of the agenda? Choose one. All those in favor? Carried. 4.1 is pulled by Councillor Collier.
Oh.
Well, I guess we've got a speaker, so we need to suspend the rules if we're going to. Sean has already pulled it, but there's somebody that would like to speak to it. Can we suspend the rules?
So moved.
All those in favor? Carried. Sean, you want to speak first? Or?
My question actually is most of an answer. I spoke with Sheila just before. I just didn't get a chance to withdraw my pull in it, so if the delegation wants to go ahead.
Okay, Sheila, would you like to come up?
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. It was somebody by Jennifer Mita?
Yeah.
Jennifer? Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice. Is it affordable to sit? Yeah.
Yeah, wherever. Whatever.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Meter. I'm a lawyer at Churchton Mazza Associates, and we have been retained by the Durham Region Home Builders Association in respect of the town's review of its development charge bylaw. And I am here to respectfully request that the consideration of the passing of the DC bylaw be deferred to the next available council meeting in order to allow for all outstanding information exchanges to be satisfied and meaningful consultation on the review of the background study to be completed. The change in the development charge from what is currently imposed amounts to an increase of 56% for single detached unit. I think we can all agree that that is an increase of substantial magnitude. And in our submission, that requires a high degree of scrutiny to ensure that it's accurate, fair and reasonable, and to ensure that new development does in fact pay for itself in an appropriate manner. The association also owes it to its membership to ensure that the numbers are right. The background study was released 2 months ago, and there is a lot of information in there in support of the substantial increase in the charge, and it's taking some time to work through it. The association retained consultants to undertake the review, including IBI, to look at it from a financial perspective, and CanDevCon to look at it from a transportation and servicing engineering perspective. IBI did submit comments and information requests to the town after its initial review of the background study. And the town's DC consultant, Watson and Associates, responded to IBI's memo. And a result of that exchange, some of the concerns and requests were satisfied. However, there are a number of positions and information requests put forward on behalf of the association that have not been addressed. And those outstanding matters are detailed in a second memo prepared by IBI Group and a separate memo prepared by CanDevCon, both of which were appended to my correspondence to Council, which was submitted on July 5th of last week. And we appreciate that that has not, very likely not afforded the town sufficient time to review the additional comments and digest the additional comments and information requests set out therein, and although many of those comments are reiterations of comments previously made. Nonetheless, again, we are therefore respectfully requesting that the committee recommend deferring consideration of the bylaw to the next council meeting. We are hopeful that this will allow sufficient time to allow meaningful consultation to run its course, and hopefully all, or at least most of the association's outstanding concerns can be addressed in that time. And finally, I would just note that the association looks forward to continuing its good working relationship with the town, and in particular to working with you to complete the review of the bylaw and the background study.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Regional Councilor Collier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to delegation. When did your client submit their comments to the town? What was the date?
The date of the original submission from IBI, I think it was in, I don't actually have the date in front of me, but I believe it was late May of
Okay, and when did the town respond?
I believe they responded a few weeks later.
Okay, so they've had the response since June. And you're aware that we had public open houses on this, stakeholder consultations on December 5th, 2017, April 6th, 2018, and then a public meeting on this in May 22nd, 2018.
Yes, sir, through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, we are aware of that. And again, my submission to you is that this is a substantial increase. We have been working through it with the association. There has been turnover on the association that has resulted in a bit of a disconnect in that short period of time. And we appreciate that that the town has gone beyond its statutory requirements in this, but we didn't get the actual background study until...
That's not where I'm going. My question is, I know we've done our due diligence, what we're required to do, but a lot of time has passed. It's been lots and lots of time for the association to come before us, especially at the public meeting in May, not today when it's supposed to be passed. And way down the road.
And through you, Madam Chair, I understand the concern. Again, the majority of the information that the association required in order to digest the increase, the proposed increase, was not provided until May 2nd, which puts us right in the 60-day statutory timeframe for providing background study.
I guess my next
Excuse
question...
me, Sheila would like to add to that.
Oh, okay. You're the chair.
Thank you. Through the chair. So when we do our statutory meetings, our first meeting, not our statutory ones, sorry, our information meetings, our first one is usually a general one, which we did in December. That is just information on process, timelines, and so forth, so what the developers can expect. We do a reach out to all the developers that are on file in our offices, and we keep track of them and continue to update them as we go when there's another meeting to be called or information to be shared. The next meeting was then April the 6th, and at that time there was provided full capital costs, which are one of the major concerns from the delegate and her client. And we did provide those in full, including draft DC charges. So that was provided on April 6th, even though it was in draft form. The full background study was published on the 7th of May. The questions we received was on May 31st, and the town did respond on June 8th. So I just wanted to clarify the timeline, so everyone knew where it was standing.
Thank you for that. Sean, carry on.
I guess my next question is, I'm trying to understand why the builders have a concern, because it's not them that actually pay it, it's the purchasers that actually pay it. So I'm trying to understand how this affects the builder.
Well, the association, it's one of their key responsibilities. Most home builders associations take on the responsibility of reviewing the DC bylaw. As I'm sure council knows, the end user does not,
It's built in the
most
price
of them
of the
don't
home.
appreciate what a development charge is at all. And it's usually a responsibility that's taken on by the home builders associations to ensure the check and balance is there, and it's provided for in the act to ensure that what is passed is fair and reasonable.
Okay. Thank you. I'll have some questions to start.
Thank you. Councilor Raymond.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I guess first of all, let's have a question for you, and then a question for staff. So you're not questioning our consultation process.
No, sir.
You're just coming in late, and you want an exception for you to give you some more time to digest the information.
Through you, Madam Chair, we are not questioning the extent of the process that's been provided by the town. We agree that it goes beyond your statutory requirements and has started some time ago. However, I also wouldn't characterize the association's involvement as coming in last minute. They did attend the stakeholder meetings. And as soon as they had the DC bylaw, the background study, they engaged the consultants necessary and started the review. Again, this is simply a substantial increase, and there has not been sufficient time in these circumstances to complete the review.
And thank you. And just the staff, can this council be satisfied that as far as the public consultation process, can you take comfort in knowing that we went over and beyond what we're required to do?
Through the chair, yes, you can.
Okay. And just in terms of, yeah, there's increases, but when we look at other similar municipalities, are we more or less in line with what other municipalities are doing?
Through the chair, that's a tough one to do a comparison on because it's based on growth and it's based on cost of your infrastructure that needs to be developed with new development.
Right.
So every municipality is different.
They're at a different spot.
Yeah, and we are far down the road. We have a lot of our development already to a point which still needs infrastructure. So, everybody's kind of in a different place. So comparing it apples to oranges, it's not quite fair, but are we, I think there is in the background study, I'm not sure what pages there are levels where we are a bit higher and a bit lower than our surrounding municipalities. Our non-residential is a wee bit lower in some areas and our residential is somewhat higher.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jordan.
Just through you to staff as well. My understanding is the current DC bylaw expires September 8th. And if we don't approve this, we will not be able to collect development charges until the new bylaw is in place.
That's correct.
And we could, of course, be in difficulties during an election year, lame duck council. And DCs are to pay for infrastructure that is needed because of new development.
Correct.
So the taxpayers will have to pick up that gap.
That would be correct.
I thought so, I just wanted it confirmed by the treasurer. Thank you.
Further from members of committee?
Well, I had questions of staff, but I was waiting until, the delegation.
Councillor Collier?
My one question's been asked as far as the time sensitivity of this, but when we put together the DCs, we have to justify under the Planning Act, is that correct? I mean, we have to show that it is actually the cost, the increase is needed in order for growth, to pay for growth?
Yeah, it's a calculation of new infrastructure and the expected forecasted growth over a given period of time.
Okay, and just referring this is the last meeting, and we're, as Councilor Jordan said, a lame duck council, so referring to after the next meeting is not an option. There is an appeal process.
There is an appeal process that will start as soon as it is passed. The next meeting would be, I think it's September 9th, and that bylaw will have expired.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Anything further? Thank you for your delegation. I'm looking for a mover. Councillor Jordan. All those in favor? Carried. Sorry. Thank you for your delegation. 4.2 is also pulled by Councillor Collier, annual investment report.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Strain, and just, sorry, let me hold this up. I'll go from memory. I think I'm just wondering, we forecasted investment income of, I think it was 981,000, but our actual investment income was about 2.5 million, and I'm just wondering why the discrepancy and why we're so low on the forecast.
We're not that bad at it. So
What am I missing by reading this?
The way it works is that when the FSP was developed, and I think it was revised in, the number itself was revised in 2015, is we set a base for investment income, and that's the 981,000. That investment income goes to the tax base. Everything above that goes to the reserves, and that's part of the financial sustainability policy.
So that's just the baseline, okay.
Yeah.
And what was our forecast as far as the interest income for the year?
Sorry, I don't have that number.
Okay, well, are we close?
Yes, we are close.
Okay, over, under?
I I'd say we're close. We're probably a little under,
A little under,
a little
okay.
conservative.
I guess my question, I brought this up many times, is now that with the changes to and allowing other types of investments, but we're still going to stick to the current.
Right.
And the only one that was in, where is it? High demand for cash flow, major projects, ongoing implementation, asset management, uncertainty of casino revenues. Okay, I get all that, but it's still, a lot of this money is long-term. That was over 5 years. A lot of it, probably a majority of it. So I'm just having trouble understanding why, knowing that we're in an interest world of 1%, and maybe you can get a GIC at 2% in a credit union, but there's a lot of other things out there that are much more, not high risk, but with better returns. We're not even looking at. It's somewhere in here. It says, oh yeah, although existing prescribed have been amended to include other investments, the investment policy is not updated as the town will not be pursuing these types of securities. So that
Okay.
decision's been made.
So sorry, through the chair, it's a temporary decision on this one. All this legislation just came in. It's coming into effect in January 2019.
Yep.
And that's the prudent investor standard. And I think that just with the uncertainties that we're facing right now, because once you get in the prudent investor standard, you're in. It's very difficult to remove from it. It creates a separate board. They look after the investments. It's based on our investment policy. So I think what we want to do is take the time, get the future a bit more settled, and we will definitely be looking into various areas of investment.
Okay, so where it says will not be pursuing this type of securities, this will be a report coming back next year.
Yes, this report comes annually.
But the next year report will have some sort of idea of what other options are available to give council the opportunity to make a decision?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. 4.4, while we have approved it, Councillor Jordan wants to ask a question.
I'll move this one, if you like.
Okay, sorry. All those in favor? Thank you. 4.4, question?
Yes, thank you for allowing that. I just want to ask the fire chief about, this is a naloxone that's being provided to our firefighters for opioid overdoses, which I'm pleased to hear. The report didn't talk about the training required to administer that. You could just speak to
Through the
that.
chair to Councilor Jordan. The training that we get is through our base hospital program that we already have enrolled in. So they receive the training for that use and administration of the naloxone through that base hospital. So in other words, the training they had regardless. If we didn't have it, they would have still got the training.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's a training package that we get through the base hospital so that we operate under that doctor's license.
Great, so they'll be ready to go as soon as you have
We
it.
have it on the trucks now, and as I said, they're all trained and ready to use it.
That's good to hear.
The only update change from what we did about 6 months ago is that now we're not having to actually pay for it through the provincial program. It's being supplied to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And 4.11, Sean?
Just to do with the insurance, it's a substantial increase going from 2 million to 5 million for a 250% increase. 150% increase. And I find that kind of excessive in my mind. I'm just wondering, are we obligated to do that? What's the justification behind that? Because I see that as maybe a roadblock where somebody wanted to have an event at one of our facilities, which we don't want.
So through the chair to Council Collier, understand your concern, the number went from 2 million to 5 million. Does seem large. It is industry standard when we look at insurance pool, other municipalities, that is really what they're doing in events that do involve alcohol. It is the best practice. In terms of what that's going to cost the customer, it's actually not as much as you would think. The increase in a permit would range from $16 to $47, depending on the size of the event. So it's actually not as big of an increase as it sounds.
Okay. I was thinking it would be hundreds and hundreds of
No,
dollars for
not at all.
insurance for that.
When you
so,
purchase
okay.
insurance in amounts of millions of dollars, the increments themselves don't have such a big impact on the price point. We actually have great cooperation with our insurance program that we provide, so we get great cost benefits for our residents, and they actually prefer to purchase through us because they do get great savings.
Okay, so is there something that says this is what we have? You said it's industry standard, so
Yeah.
is this part of the municipal insurance pool requirement?
Yes, so we have been talking with the pool, it really is where we need to be, so it's us looking at the, making improvements and enhancements to ensure we're doing the right thing.
Okay, thank you.
Anything
I'll
further?
move it.
All those in favor? All right, thank you. We have 3 presentations. 6.1. Jay, you're up.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the council and senior staff. Thank you for having me for the last GGC meeting before the summer break. We're really pleased to bring forward an update on the Community Climate Adaptation Study and specifically going through the draft climate model. Just a little bit of background. The purpose of the Community Climate Study is to provide a GIS-based tool for the town to help us identify, analyze, and evaluate climate change-based risks as part of our plan to develop a community adaptation plan. There are 3 main areas of focus within the study, and that is looking at overland and stormwater flooding, threats to the natural environment, as well as impacts to emergency preparedness and response services. The climate adaptation study will feed a climate adaptation plan, and this will be in companion of communications with external stakeholders and public consultation, and we'll develop a plan that identifies programs and the costs associated to allow Ajax to respond to the impacts of climate change and therefore protect the community infrastructure and services. And we hope to have the final plan completed by January 2019. It is a fairly substantial project, and it has been broken down into 3 major phases. Phase 1 is what we'll be talking about today, and that is the Ajax climate model. There's been some substantial data collection, consultation with a number of stakeholders, including conservation authorities, utilities, upper levels of government, as well as other service providers within the community. We've generated some preliminary GIS maps through the use of climate-based modeling. We'll then take that information and be able to conduct a full suite of vulnerability studies, and this will allow us to identify risks to the natural environment as it relates to climate change, potential risks to overland stormwater flooding as it relates to the impacts of infrastructure and the community, as well as how it will impact our day-to-day emergency preparedness and response. We also hope to have a summary report highlighting all of those vulnerabilities in a way that is easy to digest by the public and other members of the community. This information will then feed that community climate adaptation plan, so that will have the full suite of public consultation and stakeholder consultation that allows us to identify the specific projects required in order to ensure that we can continue to function as a community in the face of more extreme weather and climate parameters. So when we start talking about modeling of climate change, we do have models that we rely on to have a look at where our climate's going to be in the next 20, 30, 40 years. For the purpose of this study, we did use the Region of Durham's Future Climate Center study, which looks at what the projections for climate could be in the years 2040 to 2049, in comparison to the base year, which was 2009. And I'm not going to go through this in really big detail, it can get quite technical, but overall we are looking at an increase in temperature. So we're looking at an increase of the number of days above 30 degrees Celsius from 3 days to around 17 days per year. And there is actually a potential for Ajax specifically to reach 40-degree days. This is without humidity, this is pure temperature by the year 2049. There is an increase potential for heat waves. So right now we experience around 1 heat wave per year. And we're looking at the potential of that increasing to more than 2 events per year. And then that humidex, where we're starting to factor in the humidity as well as the temperature, we're looking at going from 3 events per year to 17 events per year, with the potential to hit 45 degrees by 2049. And that has an impact, of course, on precipitation. So we are potentially looking at a decrease overall in precipitation in the summer. However, when we do receive precipitation, it is likely that they will come in faster, more extreme rainstorms. So an 80% increase in the number of rainstorms we receive in the summer will have more precipitation of 25 millimeters. So we need to think about how the runoff of those types of events could need to be handled. But we're also looking at less snow in the winter. So potentially in February by the year 2049, 75% less snow than what we saw in 2009, with a 233% more increase in rain. So we're definitely looking at that warmer winter periods with more rain. And then the final component for the climate model is looking at an increase in extreme weather events. So with those extreme rain events, there is an increased risk of potential for lightning and other more active storms. There is an increased potential for tornadoes. The number is actually specific to the town of Whitby. Right now we sit at a 0.0024% chance of a tornado hitting the southern Durham region area. And with this climate study, it shows that it could increase to 0.0041%. So it correlates to around a 50% increase of the likelihood, but increased likelihood, but it's still very low. And we're also likely to see over the next 10 to 15 years an extreme increase in ice storms. But by the time we hit the year 2040 to 2049, because of that warming temperatures in the winter, we could actually see next to none of them at all. So it's not just about looking at the future projections, but how we're also going to get there as well. I do want to point out though, however, with the climate model, one area that wasn't considered through the Senate study was drought, and it is something that we are looking at because we know that prolonged periods without rain do have an impact on the number of the services that we provide to our residents in each place. So we're going to take this climate model, and what we're doing is actually taking those climate parameters, and the first section where we're taking this information is looking at overland and stormwater flooding. So applying some of those precipitation models through our GIS system using something called LiDAR data, which is like a 3D GIS modeling. And we're able to look at the pluvial flooding, so flooding from creeks and rivers, as well as the fluvial flooding, which is kind of more about urban infrastructure flooding as well. And these are all pictures of previous storms in Ajax. So what we have done is we've taken a look at current and historical flooding events in Ajax, and this has been done through consultation with both of the conservation authorities, as well as looking at the region of Durham's and the town's customer complaint basis. So when we've received a call and we've logged that there's a concern, we've even considered those parameters into the model. We've done a full inventory of our stormwater infrastructure, so looking at everything from storm sewers, catch basin, all the way to our major bridges. And then we've taken the climate model and the GIS models and developed a hydraulic and hydrologic climate model, looking at what is currently the 5-year, 25-year, and 100-year storm projections, and then added climate change on top of that to see what they are actually going to look like. And these models were taken from what is existing with the TRC and FOGA. And just to give you an idea of what that looks like, so right now we would assume that a 5-year peak in precipitation to a rain event would be 105 millimeters, but by the year 2049, that peak could be around 130 millimeters. There's an increase also for the 25 year, so 150 mil goes up to 180. And then there's the 100-year, which a lot of our infrastructure is built and based on, goes from 190 millimeters to 230 millimeters based on these models. So what does that look like in terms of a GIS? And again, this is just a draft model, and there's a lot of information that still needs to be inserted to make this more accurate. But you can see that, you know, in terms of catch basins where there is a potential for them to surcharge and not be able to handle the water capacity, through the 5-year, the 25-year, and 100-year storm, we have been able to identify where there is potentially a number of risks. And this is a flood vulnerability map. So the areas that are highlighted in red show areas of depression, not necessarily areas of flood. But it just shows that with the increased precipitation models, there is a potential to need to look at those flood boundaries. So in addition to the stormwater and overland flooding, we also looked at the natural environment, so natural capita. And we kind of split this into two areas. We looked at municipal trees, because that is a huge service that the town provides to its residents, is the provision of trees on streets and woodlots, as well as looking at our natural areas. So we took our existing inventories and we are able to generate some bioclimatic data, as well as generate a vulnerability scoring criteria through the model. And of course, with climate change, the natural environment is at risk for a number of reasons, storms being one of them, invasive species, again, as mentioned, drought as well. So we looked at threats to the urban forest based on the species and their climate hardiness, including looking at drought and salt tolerance, because knowing if we're going to have more ice storms, there's a good potential we'd be using more salt on our streets. Response to major diseases, pests, and invasive species. So a good one, climate-based vector-borne disease is Lyme disease. We're seeing an increase in summer temperatures, there's an increase in spread of that disease. And as a result of increased storms, we're potentially going to see more tree conflicts with our electrical and transmission infrastructure, increased risk to wetland susceptibility to drought, and of course heat island effect. And this, excuse me, and this is an example of a bioclimatic envelope. So what we've done here is taken all of our tree species in our urban forest, and for 2009, excuse me, I just moved on. So for 2009, you can see that the majority of the species, that line sits well within the comfort range for those tree species to thrive. However, when we hit 2049, the increase of temperature is shifting the species' survivability ability. So some of our major species that could be at risk include the Norway maple and the northern red oak, and on the good side is the common buckthorn, which is in fact an invasive species. So these are species that will not do as well. And the same goes for annual precipitation as well, with an increase of those drought events, as well as increased intense precipitation. Particularly the tulip tree could be at risk due to those climate changes. So through this, we have been able to generate a vulnerability score for all of our municipal trees in Ajax. And we've been able to couple that with our overhead line infrastructure as well, so we can identify where there is potential risk of tree confliction with our utilities. And with that, we've generated a vulnerability scoring. So we've looked at things like cold stratification, so the ability to handle cold in winter. Excuse me. Drought tolerance, ice storm susceptibility. So we're actually able to calculate the weight ratio of ice on trees, as well as some of the disease and pathogens. And we can identify throughout our entire inventory where we may need to make some changes to our urban forest management practices. And then from a natural area standpoint, we've taken a similar kind of process, but looked at our ecological land classification, which is done by our conservation areas, and looked at where there is risk from temperature, invasive species, as well as salt. Okay, I'm ready for the final section that we've looked at is emergency preparedness and response. So this is taking kind of both the natural capita as well as the overland flooding and looking how that's going to have an impact on our social system. So we've taken a look at a number of our demographics, our local partners and resources that may be able to provide services during a difficult event, an extreme weather event, for example, as well as some of our vulnerable buildings. And we've been able to map out in relation to where some of those climate parameters exist within the community and where some of the resources could also lie. In the end, this is a draft map, but this is a map of our critical infrastructure as identified in the Region of Durham's Emergency Management Plan, overlaid with some of the flooding information. As you can see, there is areas that we may need to look at drawing attention to in terms of how we execute in an emergency event. So again, this is just a draft plan. And all of this will undergo a full vulnerability analysis. Maybe. We do hope to conduct some public consultation in September with a presentation. Sorry, thank you very much. I'm not even sick. Are you ready, baby? We are hoping to commence the climate adaptation plan in August of this year with the intended completion by January of 2019. I just want to bring to attention as well, this project wouldn't have been possible without funding from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities through the Municipalities of Climate Innovation Program. So I'm not having any questions.
I'm glad you got it good, Jane. Questions?
No one wants to ask me anything.
Councilor Gordon?
Is this as scary as it sounds? It's just force fines.
I think we are, through the chair, the town of Ajax is taking fairly advanced action to identify those risks so that we can prevent anything significant from impacting our community. So we're doing the best we can with the information we currently have. But of course, the science is still fairly new and it is advancing almost on a daily basis. And we have challenges at the political levels, of course, in terms of wanting to support these programs. But I think we know that even if the projections are dead on, we have experienced a number of the events that are being highlighted, whether it be the 2013 ice storm, the 2015 drought, and there are ways that we could improve how we manage those events, and this is a good way to kind of start us now.
And I agree with you. I think we have done a lot, and this plan is also setting us in the right direction. The only thing I thought when I looked at this and talking about emergency situations, we have our neighborhoods, how many neighborhoods we identified through the neighborhood strategy or whatever the correct name is. I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile to work with them, because from what I've heard, that it's neighbors supporting neighbors who help people get through an extreme event until emergency services can reach them. So I'm thinking as we have that set up, it might be a good approach to work and provide training and information so that if in fact we do get hit, that people can look after their immediate neighbors.
Absolutely, and through the chair, Kayla De Silva, our community development coordinator, sits on the steering committee. And he has been instrumental in ensuring that we are engaging. This isn't a town initiative, this is a community-wide initiative, so we have looked at the neighborhood scale. We're also looking at faith-based organizations, knowing that they often have the facilities to help support us in an emergency situation, and there are more other facilities other than municipal facilities that are run in the community that could serve as an emergency shelter, for example, whether it be a school, a church, a community group. So absolutely, we are working with those community-based organizations, and that will definitely be more of the focus during the planning stage of the adaptation plan, but it is something we've already identified within the model.
Good. And my next question is, you speak about the 1 in 5 year, 1 in 25, 1 in 100. I've heard people say that those numbers are, like the 1 in 5 could be the 1 in 2 year, and the 1 in 100 could be the 1 in 10 year. Has anybody looked at that to change that? Because I think using those terms, which everybody does now, is somewhat misleading.
Absolutely, and when it comes to the precipitation model, this is probably one of the most contentious areas of discussion, because what we're seeing is, so first of all, the model was based off of the Conservation Authority's methods, so that's where they do all their flood forecasting, the 1 in 5, the 1 in 25, the 1 in 100, because we wanted to make sure that we're correlating with those. And what we've done is added the climate change parameters on top of that. But yes, there has been science to suggest that those events are becoming more frequent. But there's also some conflicting science that is suggesting that there's actually less precipitation as well. So when you're looking at it from an engineer's perspective, there's a little bit of conflicting data going on. And until the conservation authorities are able to agree on something, because at the end of the day, flooding is their jurisdiction, we can only go with the number that they set.
Well, thank you, and I think we need this sooner rather than later, because I think it's not if, it's more a matter of when, unfortunately. So, thank you.
Any further questions?
Okay.
Being no, need a move. Moved by Councillor Jordan. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you, Dave. Infrastructure, Ms. Meredith. Bob White is looking over your shoulder.
Pardon?
Bob White is looking over your shoulder.
Thank you, members of the council. We just wanted to provide to you today an update with respect to sort of the future of cricket and cricket infrastructure in Ajax. And as many of you are aware, over the last 1 to 2 years in particular, there's been growing interest within the community for infrastructure relating to cricket in Ajax. As many of you are aware, right now there is one principal cricket facility in Ajax, that being the Ajax Community Center. And it's been the home at Wesley and Monarchs since 1980. And at the time, through the 80s and 90s, the Ajax Cricket Club was a thriving facility and had a thriving membership with a strong core of volunteers that helped support and maintain that infrastructure. What we've observed, and staff have had ongoing dialogue with the current Ajax Cricket Club, the current president and vice president, as it relates to sort of the long-term disposition of the club. They've come forward and they've recognized that, you know, the state of infrastructure has been in decline for at least the last 5 years of that facility. They no longer have the volunteer base or the resources to maintain that facility. At the same time, we know that the interest in cricket is growing in Ajax, and there's been a number of community groups that have, you know, either initiated programs through the Audley Recreation Center or started up local community groups and have started to host events using sort of temporary infrastructure on baseball diamonds or within our neighborhood park system, and have had growing interest over the last couple of years in participation. So we've had considerable dialogue with, I guess, the emerging cricket groups that we are aware of, as well as the Ajax Cricket Club, and everybody is on the same page in terms of wanting to do what's in the best interest of cricket, maximizing and utilizing the infrastructure and making the appropriate investments as we move forward. So recognizing that, the intent of this report is to, you know, make council aware, but also provide acknowledgement as we move forward and look at cricket from a community perspective, that we are looking to move away from the long-standing exclusive use agreement that we have with Ajax Cricket Club, so that that existing piece of infrastructure, which is owned by the town, would fall under the same parameters as baseball and soccer, for example. So the facility booking, the permitting, the establishment of user fees, and so forth. The meeting with user groups who have an interest in permitting the facilities would happen on an annual basis. So it's really moving more in line with that, which then allows the town to start to plan for investments to upgrade, to maintain not only the infrastructure at the existing cricket club, but also recognizing the need for some additional infrastructure. And not all of it is overly expensive when you look at some of the community needs. There's temporary infrastructure that can be moved from neighborhood park to neighborhood park. There are simple investments that can be made for whether they're batting cages, whether they're artificial turf wickets, whether it's at the recreation center or repurposing of existing neighborhood parks. That there are opportunities. We know that there are a number of community members, residents, that on a Saturday or Sunday, they just want to go and play cricket. When that opportunity isn't currently provided within our existing park system. So we know that there are some opportunities, and we'll continue to work with the community groups as we move forward in terms of meeting those community needs, as we do with all other sports venues. But really the intent of this report and what's laid out in the recommendation is getting support from council as we look at the existing cricket club in terms of how we consider moving away and terminating the lease effective. We said sort of the end of August, early September of 2019. Obviously, through any future capital budget planning process, we would look to then introduce some modest improvements subject to budget approval, starting potentially in the fall of 2019 and sort of advancing it over a period of time. So really, the purpose of this report is to fundamentally move away from the exclusivity of the Ajax Cricket cricket facility as a permitted field by the Ajax Cricket Club, but also to introduce and recognize the need for additional cricket facilities in other parts of town, and as we consider and move towards the design of some new neighborhood parks within the town of Ajax as well.
Thank you. Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Dave, for the presentation. I guess no doubt, because of that exclusivity for so long, you've had discussions with the club already. And what's been their reaction from moving away from the existing model?
The Ajax Cricket Club is 100% supportive of this direction. They recognize that, as I mentioned, they don't have the volunteer base or the financial means to maintain the existing infrastructure. They recognize that without sort of the town of Ajax sort of moving forward, taking on the ownership and responsibility from a maintenance perspective, that facility would continue to decline.
And they're not concerned about competing for space, or sorry, not space, but competing for time for their events. They understand that it'll be a permitted process, and they're okay with that.
So I think part of the discussion that we've had is we still want the Ajax Cricket Club to be a successful club within the town of Ajax. We recognize they play in the Toronto District Cricket League, and they play competitive games home and away on many weekends, generally taking up a larger part of Saturdays. We've indicated that we will work with them. We want them to stay competitive and sort of retain their status in Ajax. Having said that, there are, whether it's weekends, weekday use in particular, evenings, and during daytime, where we know that the facility is currently underutilized, that we'd be able to work with other community groups who have expressed interest in using that facility.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Collier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to Mr. Meredith, just understand this correctly, there's the Ajax Cricket Club and the Ajax Cricket Academy. Okay, so the Ajax Cricket Club monitors or leases and maintains the existing facility down in South Ajax, and the Academy leases property or permits property in Audley Rec Center. So the Academy will not or cannot play on the southern. So what I'm hearing is there's a need for it, but there's not need for two. Is that right?
So the Cricket Academy, which utilizes the Audley Recreation Center, primarily the gymnasium, so the indoor space for that club. I don't want to get into the background, they were all part of the Ajax Cricket Club at one point in time, and they have gone their separate.
Is this political?
I don't have all of the information.
Everything is political.
Okay.
But I think what has happened, and we have met with the Durham Cricket Academy as part of this sort of rollout as well, and the understanding that there's greater access to this facility from a permitting standpoint that they would have, similar to there's an emerging Ajax Family Cricket Association, and Cecil, who is sort of one of the quarterbacks behind that, is a key part of that as well. So we know there's at least 2 or 3 other emerging cricket user groups that have an interest in not only that facility, but other potential facilities in North Ajax, including.
I think I read it wrong the first time because I didn't differentiate between the academy and the club, one. But I was trying to understand, so I guess one can't use the other. So what we're going to do is take it over, revamp it a little bit, and then we're going to permit it to anybody that wants it.
We will permit it, and we'll have a similar structure that we have in place for we've got 3 or 4 soccer groups, and we work together collectively to allocate field space appropriately. Go ahead.
So under our other, so whether it's ice sports, other turf sports, we have user allocation policies where we look at the history of Ajax-based groups and what their usage has traditionally been in Ajax. So we are able to look to making sure that we maintain access for those groups. And then during the allocation meetings, which Dave alluded to, we sit down with all the groups, we talk about the needs, we develop matrices, and we really create sort of that overlay of how much cricket time is required and where it would be more suitable for the grounds, for example, by ACC or inside cricket. It's different types of cricket, learn to play cricket. So there's a few things happening here that I think will feed into our larger cricket strategy, and we've definitely seen increased demand over the years. So I think this is a great opportunity for the community to grow the sport.
Okay. This is a bit of a trend, unfortunately. We've seen like Kinsman Heritage couldn't maintain their facility, and we've had to take it back. The Masons and the Lodge, we've had to take that back, and now this we're taking back. Is there any other town leased out facilities that some user groups we may have to for another day?
We do have the Ajax Soccer Club, but we've not had any discussion.
Well, that's my next question. I don't know if everybody's aware, but Ajax Soccer is going to Pickering. I mean, what's happening there with our soccer fields and that?
Yeah, we continue, again, the permitting, the revenues are the same, and I know there is something happening with the city of Pickering, but we haven't been privy to all of the information at this point in time.
Okay, well, I'm probably not either, so I won't say more, but, okay, thank you.
Any further questions? It's on Monarch, not Wesley.
Yes.
Monarch.
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 Oh, sorry.
And
Monarch
Clements.
and Clements.
I know.
Cecil, would you like to make a comment? I'm breaking the rules here. Are you in support of this?
Yes,
Okay.
to some extent. I actually had a meeting with the director here one day with Phil Navaratne about the need for cricket here in the town of Ajax. And what we found was that given the Canada 150 experience, there was a tremendous need for cricket. The cricketing world resides here in the town of Ajax. And so it was important to sort of continue the success of Canada 150 going forward.
Thank you.
And I worked with Tracy and the staff.
Good.
And we found that there is a tremendous requirement here to have more facilities. And in terms of the refinement of the Ajax Cricket Club, etc., that was also part of the discussion that we were privy to when we met with Dave. So we're all in support of this endeavor, and we're hoping that before long it's going to take root, and our kids wouldn't have to go to Scarborough and Toronto to play cricket. Cricket will be right here.
Thank you, Ms. Cecil. Much appreciated. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, David. Designation of Quaker Meeting House, Michael Solchak.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and senior staff. I'm going to be speaking today about the designation of the Quaker Meeting House under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So this building, the Quaker Meeting House, is quite a special building that's very closely linked to the early development of Pickering Village. It was built in 1867 as a meeting house for the Society of Friends, and that was on land that was donated for this purpose by Timothy Rogers, who was one of the earliest settlers in Pickering Village. The building did suffer substantial damage back in 1908 during a fire. However, essentially the exterior shell of the building does remain from 1867. Following that fire, the building remained in operation by the Society of Friends for about another 30 years before it was taken over as the Doric Masonic Lodge. So back in 2015, the town acquired the building for use as a community space with the banquet room and a continued home for the Masons, which will continue in the lodge room. Now, from the time of acquisition, it was known that there would be a substantial investment in this building, both for its long-term stability, but also to bring it up to the current building code. And thankfully, our application for funding was accepted by the federal government, and we received we will be receiving close to $435,000 for that purpose. Now, in terms of the repairs that are occurring on the exterior of the building, those are really manifested in two different areas. The first being the entrance on the north side of the building, as can be seen in this slide. This photo was taken approximately a month ago. And the second major improvement is along the rear of the building, where there's a rear addition being constructed. Now, when this project first began, it was anticipated that this part of the project would be completed by about September 2018. And that would enable this site to be open for Doors Open Ajax, which is an event coming up at the end of September. Due to some unanticipated delays, we're no longer sure that timeline will be able to be met, but that will be reassessed as things continue to move forward. Now, in the province of Ontario, if a property is to be designated as a heritage property, it must meet at least one of 9 criteria listed in Ontario Regulation 906. Now, as you can see on this slide, the property was evaluated both by the Heritage Advisory Committee and a professional heritage consultant to meet 5 different criteria of the 9. So I think what's most interesting about this property and that evaluation is that it does meet criteria in each of the 3 major subcategories. So in terms of its historical value, the relationships to the Quaker settlers, and also its long history with Masonic Lodge make it quite valuable to the community. In terms of its design, it's very simple style, but also its distinction from most other Ontario Quaker meeting houses make it quite significant. And then in terms of its contextual value, it really is a landmark in Pickering Village. The designation process can be broken down into a number of steps. And I think the most laborious is really that first step of identifying, researching, and evaluating, which has already been completed. If a property is evaluated to be worthy of designation, then the next step is for the Heritage Advisory Committee to recommend designation, which occurred at the committee's last meeting in June. The next step is council recommendation, which is the matter at hand today. And if council does recommend the designation, that will initiate a formal process where notice is served to the public and to the Ontario Heritage Trust, and then there's an appeal period that will commence. So it has been demonstrated that this building and this property is one of the most significant properties in Ajax. That's for its history, but also its architecture and its context. And designation will ensure that the building is preserved for future generations, and perhaps more importantly, it will also allow the town to take a leading role and lead by example in terms of the importance of protecting its heritage resources.
Thank you. Questions? Being none, thank you, Michael.
I'll move it. Sorry.
Okay, somebody's moved it.
I'll move it.
Pick one. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
I love that last picture. Yeah.
That was me in the background.
Okay, we have to move into the closed session now, so moved by Mayor Parrish. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks.